Greetings, we are in Junior English, and our objective for the hour now is to spend some time with Eudora Welty's classic short story, A Worn Path, a text that I believe most of us listened to read aloud, and now we want to come back to interpret, exegete. I want to point out right away Welty's years. Do you see it? Notice she lives. Are you there with me on page 1002? She lives from 1909 to 2001. Do you see it? All right? So she's 8 years from living an entire century. Now, if that's the case, think about what she saw. If she was born in 1909, she would be 20 in what year? So you do the fast math. She would be 20 in what year? See how you can kind of do that, right? She'll be 10 in 1919, 1929. 1 year before 1930, she's 20 years old. What do we know about what happens during the time from 1914 to 1946? We have World War II. Right, we have both world wars. She will live through both the experiences of the wars, right? She will live through the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King Jr., right? And then she will die just a few years after your birth, right? Most of you born when? See how that works? So ostensibly, think of it this way, Miss Cottrell, this woman saw most of the 20th century. And as a writer, then, will be able to assess the tremendous shifts in historic events as they happen. Now, there's not much debate that her short story, Worn Path, is her most important work. I want to start on page 1003. I'm going to begin at 2B. I want you to look at literary analysis, and I want you to scan that real quickly, and I want you to put this in your notes, all right? By the way, if you've got some annotation notes for me by the end of the hour, I can give you some plus points on your test sheet. As long as you're taking notes on your annotations, we're working with in-class notes, which means you're working with what color ink? Blue or black ink. That's right, blue or black ink. As long as you can show me you had red ink to start the hour and blue or black ink to finish the hour, I can give you some plus points on your test sheet. We're practicing learning how to take annotation notes, in-class notes, for our university experience. That's what we're doing here. And notice that the 2B rhetorical techniques that are going to be emphasized have to do with universal themes and archetypes. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What is an archetype? What do I mean when I use that term? Miss Udine, what is an archetype? I'm with you on 213.
Basic patterns found in a variety of works from different cultures throughout history.
Right. Now let's also put another word there. This word is illusion. Not I-L-L-U-S-I-O-N, right, Ozzy? That's what magicians do. They create an illusion. Something appears that it's not there. This is a different word, Schaefer. This is the word illusion. A-L-L-U-S-I-O-N. If you already know the definition of that word, write it down. I'm going to be impressed if you do. What is an illusion? Not I-L-L, but A-L-L. It's a literary reference to another text. Outstanding, Mr. Carn. A literary reference to another text. Now, we're going to see examples of that here as well. So when we look at this classic short story, it's something more than simply a story about an old woman walking through the woods. Okay? Often juniors will say, dude, how can a story about an old black woman walking through the woods, falling down and having to be helped up, finally making it to town where she's clearly losing her mind, how can a story about this old woman be considered a classic text? Well, let's begin with her name. Her name is what? You want to write it down. What is her name? Make sure it's written in your notes. The name of this character is what?
Phoenix.
Now that's interesting. Her name is Phoenix. Jot down what you understand about the word Phoenix. As one of my juniors once said, oh, Eudora Welty named her after the town in Arizona. Way wrong answer. Way wrong answer. Phoenix is a town in Arizona. But wait a minute. What do we know about the famous mythic phoenix bird? Jot down what you know about this before we say it out loud. I'll be very interested to see if I've got anybody that understands this archetypal mythic bird. Miss Udine knows. She's going to tell us in a second. The phoenix bird. What makes this bird so important? By the way, the phoenix bird ends up in Egyptian as well as in Mesopotamian, Phoenician, and Greek mythology. This bird is a very famous bird in literature. The phoenix bird. What makes it so important, Miss Udine?
It can be like reborn.
The phoenix bird grows until it gets really old. When it gets really old, it builds a beautiful nest, nestles down inside of that nest, and then ignites itself. It burns itself up. Out of the nest of the bird's burned ashes comes a new bird. And that bird will grow. And that bird will age. Then that bird will build a nest. And the same process begins again. Torched, and out of the ashes arises the new bird. The phoenix bird then symbolizes what? Don't say it right. The phoenix bird then symbolizes what? There's different words that you're going to have in your annotations for this concept. What is one of those possible words? What do you think?
Life.
Life, no doubt. And we might say renaissance, rebirth, right? The notion that life ends, but then it begins again. And then it ends, and then it begins again. You will maybe remember Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass in passage 6, where he says something kind of similar. He says, you live, you die, you're buried in the ground, and out of the ground comes grass, right? That will grow, correct? And life starts all over again. Keep going. What else does phoenix represent? Rebirth. Let's use another word. Rejuvenation. What does that word mean? If you're rejuvenated, what does that mean? Right, you're given new energy, aren't you? You're reignited with energy to rejuvenate. Right? Now, of course, ball players love the concept of phoenix. Any number of examples could be derived. We think, of course, of the most recent March Madness games, don't we? Where teams are completely down. You know they're going to lose. And then out of the ashes of failure will come victory. This kind of word picture metaphor happens all the time. We're familiar with it in wrestling, aren't we? Where an athlete looks like he's about to be pinned, and then in the last few seconds, he'll get free and immediately pin and win the championship. And all of a sudden, it looked like it was going one way, and all of a sudden it's going another way positively. This notion of phoenix then, most importantly for your notes, is, Miss Barnard, the idea of hope. That is to say, never give up. The phoenix bird will represent that notion of never quitting, never giving up. No matter how old, the phoenix bird knows someday it will be young again. Does that make sense? Oh, wait a minute. We missed one part. How is the young bird born? Out of what?
Ashes.
Fire, ashes. In other words, pain is a necessary correlate to spiritual growth. You have to have pain if you're going to have growth. Athletes often will use this. Sometimes a loss can be a tremendous gift if used well. Why? Because a loss can remind the athlete or the team to take more seriously the training for the next contest. Yes? This notion of the phoenix then is central to understanding our story. Number 2. The most ancient story in Western civilization involves a very particular journey, a trip. The hero's name ultimately will become the meaning of the word, the Odyssey. Our most famous hero,
Odysseus.
And the poet's name for Odysseus is? Who wrote? Homer. Outstanding. I'm with young, brilliant scholars today. Outstanding. Homer's Odyssey. Jot it in your notes. Homer's Odyssey tells the story, right, of a great hero, dynamic, young, virile, who fights at the walls of Troy for 10 years and then must make his journey homeward to Ithaca to his wife Penelope, his young son, no longer so young, Telemachus, where he will then defeat the bad guys and restore his house to order. The journey is going to involve what? Lots of what? Is it an easy journey for him? No. Terrible pain, terrible suffering. All kinds of problems. We think, of course, of Polyphemus, the one-eyed giant. We think of Scylla and Charybdis, those terrible monsters that he must sail in between. We think of his journey down into Hades, remember? Where he goes down into Hades and he must visit with Tiresias, and there he is told, warned, when you come back, you're going to have bad guys waiting for you. Ultimately, Odysseus' journey will lead to the deaths of all of his soldier friends. They all will die because they ate of Apollo's cattle, and in the process, they all are condemned to death at Scylla Charybdis. So, we now turn to Eudora Welty's Worn Path. On its cover, at the epidermal level, this is nothing more than a story about an old woman who has to go on a long walk. But let's point out a couple of things about Phoenix Jackson and her Odyssey. Let's point out that Jackson is going on a walk. She has two things. One, taken many times before. How can you tell that? How can you tell that she has done this walk many times before?
It's a worn path.
It is a worn path. It's a path she's walked many times. She doesn't live in the city. She doesn't live in the town. She lives out in the middle of the woods, and she has to walk to get to the town. Observation two. Why on this day is she taking the walk? Now, this is significant. Is she going in because she wants to watch the most recent show at the movie theater? No. The assumption is that, at one point in the story, oh, that must be what she's about. No. She's taking the walk for what reason? She has to go into town because she has a small child she's responsible for. That child has eaten lye, soap, and it has hurt the child's throat, almost killed the child. She's going to town to get medicine for the child. Whoa! Well, that makes this journey something other than a walk through the woods, no pun intended. Because if she doesn't return, what happens to the kid? Right. In other words, Phoenix Jackson is on a mission. If she doesn't get back, her grandson dies. What's interesting, though, about this journey is that she has obstacles along the way. Question for your notes. Does she have help in her journey, or does she not have help in her journey? The people who she meets, how do they treat her and why? How do they treat her? She runs, for example, across a guy who's hunting. How does he treat her? He doesn't show her much respect, does he? Right? Why not? What's one of the primary reasons why he doesn't show her very much respect? Skin color has something to do with it. He's clearly racist, isn't he? He also has some problem with her age, huh? She's a geriatric. She's an old woman. His observation is, you need to get back to your cabin. What are you doing out walking in the woods? You fell down. You need my help to get up. You need to get back. Of course, she is unbelievably driven, isn't she? She won't stop, will she? By the way, how is she treated once she gets to the doctor's office in the village? How do they treat her? They're aware of her, aren't they? Oh no, Phoenix is back, right? Phoenix is losing her mind, correct? And to that degree, they don't really help her either. Let's put a word in your annotations. These people will treat her in a condescending fashion. Now, what do I mean when I say condescending? What's that mean, Log? If I treat someone condescendingly, am I treating them nice or not nice?
Lower.
Right. I'm thinking of them as kind of lower, aren't I? Condescending means you kind of look down on them. She's black, she's old. They don't, the people who treat her this way, they don't fully understand why she is so focused on her journey. Now let's finish. And let's talk for a few moments at 2A about the meanings of this story. Because I've had juniors that say, once we finish talking about this story, wow, this is one of the cooler stories I've ever read. And here's why. Phoenix Jackson represents, in the life of a young person, the individual who takes the journey to save the child. Write that in your notes. The individual who takes the journey to save the child, to save the youth. The individual who takes the odyssey to save the child. Let's ask a 3B question, and all of a sudden this will become very clear to you. Can you make a list of at least 3 people in your life? You've lived almost 20 years. Can you make a list of at least 3 people in your life who have taken the journey to help make your life better? I want you to write them down. But the reason I want you to write them down is I want to point out something about those people. By the way, for those of you who struggle to understand even one person, let's make an observation. When you are born, you cannot sustain yourself. Without help, you will die. From the moment of your birth, there were individuals, dare we say it? There were Phoenix Jacksons who were there doing things for you. Question, does the kid back in the cabin have any idea what kind of journey Phoenix Jackson is on? No idea. Does the kid back in the cabin understand the importance of the journey and her return? Probably not any idea. In other words, let's say it out loud. The kid back in the cabin is a child. We define children as ignorant. They are stupid. I don't mean in the traditional stupid way. I mean unaware. They are unaware of what? The kid in the cabin is unaware of what? He has no idea of what?
The tribulation, the journey.
Right. Without the work of his grandma, he dies. He doesn't make it. In other words, Phoenix must finish her journey, put it in your notes this way, so that he can begin his journey. See, think about this. I've said this, and sometimes juniors are like, oh, I never thought about that. Your great, 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 great grandma had to live so that you could. You're not here if she didn't. Now, most of you will say, unless you've done any kind of study on this topic, most of you will say, I don't even know who that was. That's the point of the story. Welcome to what it means to being a child. In other words, this story suggests if you're ever going to be something other than a child, you must respect legacy. What others have done for you long before you came along. Both in your family, in your nation, right? I mean, think about it. On some level, guys, this is what we've been doing since September. We've been studying the names of people who did things so that you could be here. Of course, does the child in the hut have any clue about that? Right? No. Right? It works the other way, doesn't it? Already, some of you will identify ways in which you are starting to help younger kids. Sometimes, I had a junior once said, that is so true. I got to babysit this little kid, and that kid is a pain in the rear and never says thank you. To which, Eudora Welty's story says, right. Let's put it in our notes. Phoenix is taking a journey she's never going to be thanked for. Why? Because she will, are you ready for this? She will be dead when that young kid grows up to be a man old enough to be able to appreciate it. She will already be dead and gone. If he grows to be a man it will be because of her. Who are the Phoenix Jacksons in your life?
He is.
And when did you last say to those Phoenix Jacksons, thank you. I appreciate what you've done. Of course, for many of the Phoenix Jacksons in your life, are you ready for this? You can't say thank you anymore. Why can't you say thank you? They're gone. They're gone, aren't they? They're gone. But some of those Phoenix Jacksons in your life are still there. They're still there. Let's point out the other side of this story. Sooner or later, you're going to become the Phoenix Jackson for somebody else. You're going to be the one who has to take the journey so that they can take the journey. And when you do that, don't expect a lot of thanks. They'll know, but it will be much later in their life if they know at all. That's the whole point of the story, right? Older people have to go through lots and lots of terrible things so that you have an opportunity to have a life. Final question. What does the story say about respect for the aged? Write it down. What does the story say about respect for the geriatric, for the aged? For the people who in many ways, often, the appearances are no longer of value to society. They have become so old, for example, that many of them have retired and no longer work. What does the story say about these people? Why respect them? They have gone through lots and lots of journeys through the woods, haven't they? They have suffered lots for your benefit. Even though maybe you're too much of a child to understand it. I once had a junior that said, when you read this story right, it's kind of an insult story. It kind of challenges me. It insults me in some way. Eudora Welty smiles from the grave and says, right, that's right. When you're a child, all you do is take the medicine. You don't ask where it came from. You don't care. But as you get older, you realize that without the journey through the woods and back, you're not alive. You don't make it. You don't get to have the experience of your life. And the legacy is passed on to you. Your job is to also take the journey through the woods. That's what you're preparing for. Think about all the different ways this is taught, for example, in school. One way, obviously, is to endure the pain of studies, but that's only one small part of it. What are some other ways we learn how to stick with stuff through school? What are some other ways we learn that? Do we learn it in our sports? Yeah, of course we do. Think about it. We learn it in our sports. For example, Ms. Stevens was talking about how challenging, difficult cheerleading is in a speech recently. It isn't that she's learning cheerleading. It's that she's learning how to start something and what? Finish it. That's what she's learning. Really? Why do you got to learn that? Because sooner or later, Mr. Mortimer, you're going to have to take the trip through the woods. It's not going one way. You got to do what? You got to come back. You don't only go to the town, you got to come back, right? Of course, the reality is, by the time she comes back, it may already be dark. She may have to do the return trip through the woods in the dark. Why would she do that? Why would she do that? What's the word? It's love, isn't it? Right? It's love. She loves her grandson enough. She's willing to risk her own life. That's the point of the text. Right? The worn path. All right, finish up with the annotations that you've